Hello hobby friends! Today's video is all about restarting an abandoned project. I figured I would use Mantic, terrain crates, industrial accessories and Starship doors to help zhuzh up the project a bit while I gave it another crack. First things first, I pulled off some of the details I'd put on prior and then got out some Game Master Seacliff Grey foam safe spray and gave it an undercoat with that. I envisaged that this was going to eventually be some sort of pump house. Could be for sewer or fresh water, but a Necromunda could be both the same thing. So I needed platforms for people to stand on and shoot at, which is my first port of call in crafting. I got to work with some 3mm styrene sheet. Simply drew some lines, made some shapes. Get out your scalpel, score the styrene sheet, and then snap it nice and cleanly. While styrene can be expensive to buy at times, it is great to work with, nice and easy. You can really progress fast with it. I then got out some styrene checker plate sheets and super glued it onto my platforms and cut them out. I then got to work making some handrails using just some styrene rod or tube. It's pretty easy to work with as well. You just simply roll the tube back and forth on your scalpel and it'll cut straight through. You can also actually use metal pipe cutters that you can buy from your local hardware store, but I think it's a bit overkill. Another great thing about working with styrene is that you can use sprue goo and extra thin cement. I found that while I was putting these handrails together, I'd sprue goo it together and then quickly dab it down with some extra thin. And when painted, it actually gave a kind of welded together, fabricated by hand look to these handrails. Also, don't forget when making handrails in Necromunda to leave a few broken areas for when people fail their initiative test and fall and have to roll to see if they get wounded or not. Considering how easy to work with, how cheap and plentiful this material is, styrene hobby products seem to be very expensive and hard to find. If anybody knows of a great source online of where you can get your hobby styrene products, please put it down in the comments because I'd love to know. With the platforms completed for now, I got to work on the concrete section of the pump house. I saw there was a few divots and bits of damage that I didn't think worked too well, so I got out some bog or wall filler or spackle, whatever you want to call it, and just smeared it about with my finger as it paints easily. I then got to work putting together some of those Mantic terrain crate bits and pieces. I find the plastic easy to work with. Sprue goo and clear cement works quite easily with it too. A bit softer than say GW plastics. Also, if you do not have one of these Tamiya hobby razor saws, you need to get one. It is life-changing when making terrain. It cuts so neatly, so suave, very little waste, and it works well on models too. Now, if you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll know that what I've done here is use the Dulux, Duramax, Granite Effect, 2 coats to give instant texture. Now it's time to attach the platforms to the terrain. I decided to place this pumpy looking bit from the industrial accessories kit in the middle to create a bit of an object to have to maneuver around or to use as cover. And again, just easy styrene. With the styrene from the kit, you just use some extra thin cement and some sprue goo to meld it in, and I just plonked it down. But I had a problem. My hot glue gun was on the fritz, since bought a new one. And I was trying to figure out how I was going to attach these without having to wait half a day for PVA glue to dry or super glue that was going to melt through styrene foam. So I decided to use some 3M double-sided mounting tape. A bit off the wall, I know, but it actually worked really well and was an instant bond. I wouldn't normally recommend it, but in a pinch, it worked fantastically well. And it actually gives a bit of give and flex, so it'll probably never come apart unless you really try to rip it off. Now I used here Lego triangular girder supports, which are chopped up for the overhanging platform. I find Lego details give great in scale for 28 to 32mm details, and they're a lot cheaper than most other hobby supplies. Now for some extra greebles, I used some cheap jewelry bits and bobs I got from Lincraft. It's a hobby craft store here in Australia, along with the Mantic pipes, as the normal connected pipes weren't working with the building. Add this little octopus head here because, you know, Call of Cthulhu, using the sump for sure, some chain, etc. All the usual stuff that I'm sure you're familiar with. Now to blend in things like the pipes, the wall and the concrete, or the doors and the concrete render effect, simply got some bog, spackle, wall filler, whatever you want to call it, a bit of water, and just dabbled it in. For the ladders, more Lego. I think this is from a fire engine kit, but I again bought it from eBay. Chopped it up to suit, glued it in, bit of baking soda, and it worked just great. Then to undercoat all of it, use some Dulux spray here, the vintage charcoal chalky cut effect, and that gives a nice matte finish, I find. Perfect for the next stage, which is dry brushing. Now for concrete, I cannot emphasize this enough. Personally, when I look at concrete, it's both warm and cool. It's mottled. So I always start out with Fenrisian grey, and I always finish with a white, but in between it, I always add an olive green, stone grey, warm and cool colors all together, and it always looks mint, personally, I think anyway, at the end. Now for the steel, because it's a large area, I simply get a large bottle of Vallejo aluminium air, I think I have, drop in a few different ink drops into it to add it up. I think carbon black and burnt umber from Liquitex, and some Vallejo oxide dropped in there too. And then smear it all about, all over the steel. Nice, quick coverage. It does cover deliciously. And that's that for now. Because it's time for something completely different. I've never done lighting or electronics on this channel before, although I have dabbled with it on the side, but I was most excited this Light My Bricks Terrain hobby kit. Now aside from the kit, I also did order some extra lights and one or two of the power packs because they didn't come with it in the kit. But otherwise, so easy to use. I got to work straight away using some styrene rod, or tube actually, making a basic rudimentary light, essentially to be on top of the tower, down just something like an old street light style thing. Easy to do, sprue goo, chopped it up, put the light in, and then was trying to figure out how I was going to hide the wires, and came to realization, why not just have the wires running around? I mean, this is the Underhive after all. There is no electrical code, I'm pretty sure, other than what the Omnisire might dictate. I even ran this cable here right across in front of where I had a dead rat, so it looked like the rat had chewed through the cable and gotten a shock. But seriously guys, this stuff is easy and it gives a great effect. Now the effects boards are easy to use. Here I think I'm using the scary effect board, which gives the flickering light. There's 3 different outputs, which means that each output flickers at a different time. So I guess if you wanted them all to run on one, you'd have to go effects board and then have that plugged into like a multi-output, and then it would all run off the same one. But I've set it up so that different lights flicker at different times, as you can see here. I think it's great, so easy to use. Now time to paint some detail. The handrails, orange, then yellow, then I simply sponged on some Rhinox hide to give that rusted, flaky metal effect. Some Tesseract glow was used for the computer screens, and I did a white stripe down the side on the concrete by masking up and just stippling on some paint over the grey. Nice and easy. Pull off the masking tape, nice straight line. Now it's not Necromunda without hazard stripes. How I do hazard stripes is simply, I do 1 or 2 masking tape lines, I stipple on some white. If it's a dark colour, I do grey then white. Then I get out some German grey, which I water down, and using a flat brush, quickly pull some stripes across. Once this is dried, I use a contrast paint, in this case ironed in yellow, which works well over the stippled effect. Then quickly pull off the masking tape, tidy up any bleeds, and I'll find this works really well. Because you have the straight line from the masking tape, it makes the whole thing look neat and sharp enough to be in world, as it were, and you don't have to worry about the slight wonkiness of your actual lines. And don't forget guys, this is terrain and immersion, it's not Golden Demon. Just get it done. Now for a foam safe wash, I use water, burnt umber, carbon black from Liquitex inks, along with a few drops of different contrast paints, and let it dry. Now time to use some dirty down products for rust, etc. Now I find a lot of people have trouble with these. The key is it needs to dry fast. You need to make sure your pot is warmed in some water and there's a differential between product and your ambient temperature. Here, I'm putting down the dark rust and then I quickly follow up with the yellow rust as like a highlight, smear it out really quickly. And then I hit it with the heat gun, not too hard, so I don't melt the foam, etc. And then once it's dry, I come back in with a wet, stiff, but not dripping brush, smear it all up again and like work out the tea staining, and then hit it with a heat gun. For graffiti, I use a mix of different sci-fi swear words, as it were, like Smeg from Smeghead and Red Dwarf, or Flarg, which I got from Uncle Adam, which is where I found out about these are Sharpie brush-tipped acrylic paint pens. They are so cheap, I think it was $30 from Officeworks, and they work really well. I highly recommend it. I also do use some fluorescent paints to highlight some of the words too, where appropriate. Just do it, it's graffiti. Whatever you feel like doing will work. I also like to follow up graffiti with posters. I like to think that posters really bring in scaleness to the world, as it were, and make it look lived in. Don't forget, you don't just need to stick them on the walls, you can also use them as trash lying about, a bit of rubbish and litter. To apply them, I simply soak them in water and then stick them on with some either watery PVA glue or a bit of matte Mod Podge, and that makes them conform nicely to the scenery and fit in the piece. Afterwards, I also like to use some Vallejo streaking grime, which I dab around the piece, and then add little drips of dirty paint water, which will then make it run down over the posters so they don't look too clean and like you just printed them off. If you happen to have a particularly dank looking paintbrush jar at the moment, you could just use dirty paint water. I'm pretty sure you get a similar effect. I also use the last of my matte Mod Podge here to protect the edges of this foam piece. XPS foam, unlike this extruded polystyrene foam, is a lot more rigid, whereas this stuff chips easily. For a final flourish, I decided to add some blood and gore. Now remember, when you're doing blood, tell a story with it, don't just put a pool of it, as it were. I used a toothbrush to flick up some blood for the blood god, I think it's called technical paint, and then smeared in some other reds too, did some handprints, some footprints, some drips and drabs, as it were. And then I got out the dirty down gore. It's a brand new product, haven't used it before. It's a little bit tricky to use. Do not put a paintbrush into it because you can throw that away. Get out some toothpicks or satay sticks, as I've done here, and you kind of pull it out and you work it out into strings and put it where your blood splatters are. I find this gives a nice effect and looks a bit like brain matter or gore is just splattered up on the wall where someone's had a particularly grisly end. So here it is. Please comment down below and let me know about any projects you've picked up after abandoning them for a while. Or you can just comment on whether or not Necromunda does have two separate systems for drinking and sewerage, or whether it's one and the same. Until next time, like and subscribe, and I'll see you then.